Welcome students to your lessons in social psychology. Today we are going to deal with attitude change. In today's lesson we are going to deal with what is attitude, then types of attitude change. We will also talk about certain factors which contribute to attitude change in this process and then go to the theories of attitude change. In fact, we will be talking about certain theories which are a part of consistency theories like balance theory, congruity theory and effective cognitive consistency theory and so on and so forth. So, let me introduce you to the study of attitudes basically. What is attitudes? In fact, this study of attitudes is core and it is central to the field of social psychology, because attitudes are capable of affecting every aspect of our experience. Attitudes are lasting, general evaluations of socially significant objects, including people as well as issues, and they are based on organized beliefs and tendencies to act in a particular way. Generally, attitudes are learned. They can be formed either by your direct experience, by conditioning that you have, by observational learning, and sometimes by drawing also inferences from what we do, like self-perception. What we do is understood by us. Attitude learning in children on the other hand is highly dependent upon their parents, and also of course today we can talk about the mass media always. So, attitudes can reflect evaluations of any aspect of the world. They help in understanding people's responses to new stimuli. The dictionary meaning of attitudes per se is settled behavior as indicating opinion. It's settled or firm. Thurstone, way back in 1928, defined attitude as the sum total of man's inclination and feelings, prejudice or bias, preconceived notions, ideas, fears, threats and convictions about any specific topic. Attitudes, please remember, are subjective. They are very much your own. Attitudes are defined from different points of view. Like one view, for example, says that an attitude is understood based on how positive or negative or favorable or unfavorable a person feels towards a particular object. This definition views attitude as feeling or an evaluative reaction to object or objects. Then there is a second view. A second definition represents the thoughts of Allport, Gordon Allport, all of you. So, who views attitude as learned predisposition to respond to an object or class of objects. For example, it can be a product, a category, a brand, a service, an advertisement or a retail establishment. All these in a consistently favorable or unfavorable way. So, we are seeing this favorable unfavorable once again. Another definition of attitude popularized by cognitively oriented social psychologists says that attitude is an enduring organization of motivational, emotional, perceptual and cognitive process with respect to some aspect of the individual's world. Now, putting together an overall understanding of the views defining attitude, we can just summarize it using three components. The first is the cognitive or knowledge component, a person's belief about an object. Second is the affective or emotional component, a person's feeling of like or dislike for the object. And third, the conative or behavioral tendency component, that is action tendencies toward an object. Each of these three components tend to remain in balance with the other two. These three are together. That is, it involves what people think about, feel about and how they would like to behave towards an object towards which the attitude is represented. Attitudes are important because they can guide your thought, behavior, feelings. Again, there are two types: explicit attitudes, for example. Explicit attitudes are consciously accessible. These are the attitudes that are controllable and easy to report, whereas there are implicit attitudes which are unconscious associations between objects and evaluative responses. Now, let us come to attitude change. Attitude change occurs any time an attitude is modified. Thus, change occurs when a person goes from being positive to negative, from slightly positive to very positive, or from having no attitude to having some attitude. This brings us to the types of attitude change. Psychologists claim that attitude change is of two types. One is a congruent change and second is the incongruent change. When a favorable attitude becomes more favorable after a particular incident, then there is a congruency here, hence it is a congruent change. However, when an attitude changes towards unfavorable, that is, direction of change is opposite side, from favorable to unfavorable, from whatever has been already held, then it is called incongruent. Now it is opposite direction. So now let us talk briefly about the factors contributing to attitude change. We have to be a little elaborate over here, not too brief. Psychologists have identified a number of factors which affect attitude change. Let us start off with the changing reference group. Psychologists found that change in the reference group leads to change in attitude as well. In one of the experiments that Newcomb has conducted in 1950, he found that a group of fresh entrants of girls, they were conservative when they entered the college, as they were coming from a family of conservative parents. However, the environment of this college that they entered into promoted liberalism in them. In the last year of the college, it was found that the same girls have shifted from conservatism to liberalism. So the group that they belong to must have some influence. Then comes the changing of group affiliations. This also has direct bearings on change in attitudes. It's been observed that when a person breaks ties with old group and joins a new one, he readily adopts to the norms, values, opinions and beliefs of this new group that he enters into. Therefore, change in attitude will be seen here. However, this change in attitude depends upon certain things. Number one, the characteristics of the group. This means that the norms, values and beliefs of the group, if they are more attractive to the individual, then the individual is likely to change his attitudes more readily. Then the second point is the characteristics of membership in the group. This refers to the individual's position in the group, in the new group in fact. If the group gives a greater status and power and prestige, then the individual is more likely to change his attitude in the direction held by that group. The third factor is additional information. Change in attitude of an individual is also brought about by information received from means such as media. It can be audio, it can be visual, print, electronic. Any of these can contribute. So the person also gets information through interaction with others as well. However, change in attitudes resulting from reception of additional information depends upon the nature of social situation in which the information is given. So, what are those social situations? Why is it that the social situation determines the influence of upon the individual? Let us talk about those social situations now. Three types of such social situations may be seen. One, when the information is given in front of several people rather than when he is alone. Then, if it is given in front of several people, attitude change is faster and greater. When an individual publicly accepts and declares his attitudes and beliefs, that means he commits himself to those attitudes and beliefs. However, when there is a situation where the individual has not made his attitudes public, attitudes as well as values, both these public, that means his commitment is private and not public. It has been noted that attitude change, if advocated through discussion method, then it is more successful instead of lecture method. So, these are some of the conditions or social situations in which there is an influence. Then the fourth point, which is the factor contributing to attitude change, is persuasive communication. Change in attitude through this persuasive communication depends upon certain factors, mainly four. One is the source of communication, second is the characteristics and content of communication, third can be the channel of communication, and fourth can be characteristics of the audience. Let us look at each of these sources one by one. First one, the source of communication. What do we mean by source of communication? By this, we mean that the person who provides information for attitude change, that is the source, the person who is giving the information. Studies show that there are certain characteristics of source which are more effective in producing attitude change. And what are those characteristics is an interesting discussion between us. What do you think? Who would you accept? Let us say a film star tells something, would you accept, or a person on the road tells something, would you accept? Would you accept if it is shown with the help of an attractive model in an advertisement, or would you accept it if someone who you know and through them you know would use the product? So, you see these sources, the influenceability of the sources very clearly in several advertisements that we see. They use, in fact, consumer psychology uses this to a lot of extent. So, let us look at these factors of change. First is credibility of the communicator. So, credibility of the communicator means a person who is viewed as more trustworthy and expert in a particular field or in the issue on hand, he or she is likely to bring about more change in an attitude. For example, for a beauty product, a girl would be more influenced, an adolescent would be more influenced, whether it is a boy or a girl, if that product is advertised by a film star rather than anyone who is seen on the road, or someone who knows and they know rather than that. Similarly, when a child has to take an energy drink, a regular energy drink, then it would be nice if one of the cricket stars or a sports star or a film star says, yes, this is because it is this drink which has given me energy. Every day we keep seeing such advertisements, isn't it? So, and a beautiful star, a very attractive and good looking star giving an advertisement, being a part of the advertisement, modeling for an advertisement would attract us more. So, that is the second source, attractiveness of the communicator. So, this brings us to the second aspect, that is attractiveness of the communicator. Again, this has two components. One is the beauty and the second is the similarity. Attractiveness does not just depend upon the beauty. For example, when I say a film star advertises for a beauty soap, then yes, some people may be attracted by it. But when a particular housewife like me advertises a person who looks like a housewife like me, every middle class woman then would think this is like me. So, this is going to be economical. When she advertises for a soap or when she advertises for a washing powder, housewife or a homemaker or a normal middle class person would think they are just like me. This is going to give me economy. This is going to work out for me financially. So, that comparison. So, two aspects attract an individual. One is beauty, but beauty alone does not attract, it can be similarity. So, when the communicator is highly beautiful, then yes, the change in attitude is more. This is not just about the feminine aspect of it. Let me tell you, many film stars, for example, any film star for example, would attract youth, adolescents and certain segments much more than any ordinary person. Whereas, an ordinary person, an ordinary looking person may attract another segment of people. So, for example, a beautiful heroine advocating use of a particular soap likely to bring a change in attitude, hair oil likely to bring an attitude change than an ordinary looking woman. Please look at the pictures from age old great heroine to I mean some 40 years back and 20 years back or till 10 years back, and the current attractive heroine and the sports stars. All these are used very well in the advertisements in order to influence the attitudes of people. Again, people are more influenced by people who are like them. Since I said similarity, I am trying to explain to you with the help of some examples. Such people are considered to be one of them, and they are less expected to deceive the person. When you see an ordinary person, being able to enjoy with his child, he is no film star. A young father would want to enjoy his life just as that person would do. So, he is able to see the similarity and identify with that model. So, let us go to the next aspect, the content and characteristics of communication. So, there are dimensions of content and communication like fear, arousing, appeal. Like for example, when some information is aimed at arousing fear or negative emotions, but at the same time it provides alternatives to reduce that fear, then this has been found to be more effective. For example, you see the statutory warning on cigarette packets that cigarette smoking is injurious to health. This is an example of this type. Similarly, if you don't wash your hands with this particular lotion, you may catch, there may be bacteria, there may be viruses, there may be organisms which may affect your health. So, we use that particular lotion. So, such are the examples for this point. Okay. Then coming to the organization of information. The next is organization of information. The first issue is in regard to this organization of communication is the effect of one-sided versus two-sided communication. That is, should a communicator present just the arguments in favor of the change of attitude in the receiver, or should the arguments be presented with counter arguments? It can be debate, it can be discussion also. The second is whether the message should draw its own conclusion or it should be left to the audience. That is open. The third centers over the primacy versus recency effect. As psychology students, you might have heard already about primacy and recency effects. That is, whether the information presented first or information presented recently, last, is more effective. Primacy for the information which is presented first, recency which has been presented recently. The next is the channel of communication. That is, to what extent a communication will be effective. This depends upon which channel of communication is being used. Different channels have differential effect on attitude change. You have radio, you have television, you have newspaper. All these are examples of mass media directed at communicating with the masses like us. But it has been found that personal contact is more effective than any mass media in producing an attitude change. So, direct communication thus helps much more, and psychologists have found that attitude change is greater when an individual receives information through active participation than when he receives information through any other indirect means or pamphlets or posters which are seen and glued on the walls. When directly you talk to people, that reaches them much more. The next factor is the characteristics of the audience itself. Effectiveness of communication aimed at changing attitudes of audience is also dependent upon the characteristics of the audience who are receiving the message. It's been found that people who are high in self-esteem, those who are pretty high in self-esteem, self-confidence, and are aggressive by nature are less likely to be affected by the communication to change their attitude. Age also has been found to adversely affect change in attitude. Increase in age brings about some rigidity and conservatism in thinking. Thus, an aged person is less likely to be affected by persuasive communication compared to a person who is lower in age than him or her. The next point is the enforced contact. One important factor in attitude change now is this enforced contact. What is enforced contact? It means a social situation where two opposing parties are compelled to interact with each other. For example, when a supporter of a political party A and a supporter of political party B are compelled to live in the same room and they have to share things, then it is presumed that such enforced contact allows people to understand each other in a better way through repeated exposure to each other. In such a situation, people receive first-hand information. Directly you are in touch with the other person, isn't it? So, about each other, and gain the opportunity to test the information which is received as well. So, thus the enforced contact may bring about some change in attitude. Now, we come to the major crux of whatever we have to do today, that is the theories of attitude change. We will talk about consistency theories basically. What are consistency theories? The basic assumption of these consistency theories is the need of an individual for consistency, consistency being the same for a long duration. So, there must be consistency between what? Between attitudes, between behaviors, and among attitudes and behaviors. In all these there has to be a consistency. A lack of consistency causes some discomfort. so that an individual attempts now to ease that tension. Because of the discomfort, he feels uneasy, and hence that has to be eased. That tension can be eased by adjusting attitudes and behaviors such that once again that balance is achieved or consistency is achieved. This brings us to the first theory, that is balance theory. Like I said, a balance has to be attained when there is an inconsistency. So, that balance is what we are going to talk about now. One of the earliest consistency theories was balance theory. Very evident what that balance means. Relationships among the perceiver, another person and an object are the main focus of balance theory. This has been proposed by 𝗬𝗏 way back in 1950s. The theory is basically concerned with the consistency in the judgment of people and or issues that are linked by some form of relationship. Between these three elements, two generic types of relationships are considered to exist. One is sentiment relations and the second is unit relations. What are sentiment relations? The sentiment or linking relations include all forms of sentiments, and the unit relations express the fact that two elements are perceived belonging together. One unit, as one unit. Both sentiment relations and the unit relations can be positive, and both can be negative as well. Please look at the chart. So, you are seeing the chart before you. There are three components: the person, the other person and the impersonal entity or the object. So, relationships can exist in any combination. For example, the relationship can be between the person and the other person. When there is a relationship between the person and the other person, it can be a sentiment relation or it can be a unit relation. When it is a sentiment relation, it can be positive or negative, and when it is a unit relation, again it can be positive or negative. Similarly, there can also be a relationship between the other person and the impersonal entity. Again, this relationship can be sentiment relation or unit relation, and sentiment relation can be positive or negative, and unit relation can be positive or negative. Now, on the whole, you see that relationship is divided into sentiment relations and unit relations, and both can be positive or negative. So, in these relationships, the cognitive perceptions of the perceiver are very important, and you have seen that there are 8 configurations possible. 4 are balanced and 4 are unbalanced. So, it assumes that balanced states are stable and unbalanced states are unstable. Where unbalanced state occurs, that is where the psychological tensions which are created that motivate the person to restore the balance cognitively. And how does that happen? They change the relations. So, the perceiver attempts to restore the balance by changing the attitude towards object or other persons. For example, a young person believes that imported phones are of greater quality compared to local phones. For his birthday, let us say his father gifts him a phone of local make. Then in this situation, there are 3 elements, that the person, the father and the phone. To bring the balance in this particular situation, the boy, the adolescent will either change his negative relation with the local phone, or he will ask his father to change his attitude and give him imported phone. Thus, if the person starts saying that the local phone is not so bad, it means that he has changed his relation and brought the balance in the situation. So, the theory has been criticized, however, on certain grounds. The theory does not consider the degree of sentimental or unit relationships, nor the relevance to the perceiver of the elements and relations. Then as a consequence, there are no degrees of balance or imbalance, and it is not possible to make quantitative predictions about the degree of attitude change. So, this brings us to certain extensions of 𝗬𝗏's balance theory, and we will talk about it in the next session. So, today students, we have talked about what is attitude, can attitude be changed, and if attitude does change, how does it happen, what are the factors which contribute to the attitude change. Then after discussing all these, we have come to the theories, out of which we have discussed about 𝗬𝗏's theory. In the next session, we will talk about Newcomb's theory and then go to the Festinger's theory. Thank you.